Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. So my name is Ali, and I'm your host for this evening. And I'm so excited to be introducing Shugri Said Salh and Mathangi Subramanian here to discuss Shugri's newest novel, newest memoir. I'm so sorry, memoir, The Last Nomad. So before we get into the fun stuff, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. As much as we miss having you all in the bookstore, it has been such a delight to expand this online program to connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. So I will be linking books directly in the chat all evening. So it'll be super easy to go find them. For those of you in Seattle, or the Seattle area, come on in. All of our bookstores are currently open, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in store. Or if you're not local, we of course do ship. And once again, we are so grateful for your support. So while you're over on the website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have some great events coming up in the next couple months. And if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases and our online book clubs. And of course, you can follow us on any of the major social media platforms at Third Place Books. For the quickest updates and recommendations. And we have a pretty good time on our social media platforms, so I definitely recommend checking those out. So we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which I very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or the bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause, connecting with each other. We would love to know where you are from or your favorite latest read. But when it comes time for questions, do make sure that those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. So before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone of our commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of event attendees and guest authors. So in our chat and question spaces, do make sure that you are leading with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. Finally, there are auto-generated closed captions available from the top or bottom of the screen. Select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. And I believe that that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce Shugri Said Salh, who has been storytelling since she could talk and learned about the power of stories to entertain, teach, and transform from her grandmother and the nomadic community in which she was raised. Her debut memoir, The Last Nomad, Coming of Age in the Somali Desert, tells the story of growing up with her nomadic grandmother, experiencing the risks posed by the desert, as well as the beauty, innovation, and centuries of traditions inherent to this way of life. She emigrated to North America in 1992 after the Civil War broke out in her home country. And now, when she isn't writing or telling stories, she works as an infusion nurse. In conversation tonight, I am so pleased to introduce Mathangi Subramanian, author of A People's History of Heaven, which was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award and was longlisted for the PEN/Faulkner Award and the Center for Fiction First Book Prize. Her middle grade book, Dear Mrs. Naidu, won the South Asia Book Award, and her picture book, A Butterfly Smile, was inducted into the Nobel Museum by economics laureate Dr. Esther Duflo. A Fulbright Narrows Scholar, her nonfiction has appeared in the Washington Post, Harper's Bazaar, Ms., and Al Jazeera America, among others. So thank you both so very much for being here. I am so excited to listen in on this conversation. If you need anything, of course, give me a shout. I will be listening. Same goes for all of you in the audience. I will be in chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to our authors. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Shugri today. I just wanted to start by acknowledging that Third Place Books is on the unceded ancestral territory of the Salish, Duwamish, and Suquamish people, and that I'm coming to you from Denver, which is the unceded territory of the Apache, Cheyenne, Ute, and Lakota people. And I think that's a particularly important thing to say today because we are talking to an author who writes so beautifully about displacement and native land and indigenous cultures. So we're just going to start with Shugri. I believe you have a passage that you're going to read for us to start.
Yeah,
All right.
I want to first to thank everybody who's joining us, especially you, Mathangi and Ali, and I want to encourage everybody to order books from Third Place Books because it is a drought, right? Everybody is really struggling in this tough time, so I hope you can be some help in that way. So this is the book, The Last Nomad. I wanted to kind of quickly mention, Mathangi, that every chapter, with the exception of the prologue, starts with Somali proverb, and that is it translated. Okay. All right. Prologue. I am the last nomad. How can I be the last one? Nomad still exists in that faraway desert where I grew up. So how can I make such a bold statement? What I'm really trying to say is I am the last person in my direct line to have once lived like that. And now I feel like the sole keeper of my family story. As I sit here in my home, California, weaving my tale for you, the weight of that responsibility urges me on. All my ancestors on both sides of my family were nomad. They traveled the East African desert in search of grazing land for their livestock and the most precious resource of all, water. When they exhausted the land and the clouds disappeared from the horizon, their accumulated ancestral knowledge told them where to move next to find greener pastures. They loaded their hats and belonging into the most obedient camels and herded their livestock to a new home. My family was at the mercy of the weather. At the end of July, the long dry season, when the clouds finally rumble with rain and we look up the sky with renewed hope. As the desert quenched its thirst, the red earth crackled back to life. Responsibilities is adults welcome the rain with drums, singing and dancing. Children get fat and healthy, sitting around the fire at night. They soaked in the folktales and poems passed down from generation to generation. But despite the renewed abundance of food, we knew we had to preserve some of it for the dry season to follow. Sometimes drought hit harder than usual, killing both livestock and people. Bones and twigs soon litter the train where goats and sheep once happily grazed. On those times, my ancestors ceased singing under the moon. Their drums hardened and they longed for good news. Children no longer heard stories by the fire, and an old poet will bellow to the desert, voicing his agony. He will speak of a dying land, taking his precious camel. His mournful poem will then travel through time and across borders to remedy the pain of his people for years to come. My children, raised in California, know nothing of the nomadic life except from the stories I have shared. As I sit here now in my comfortable suburban home, listening to my teenage son excitedly tell me about his favorite YouTuber, I am reminded acutely of the void between my past and present. I speak of a world in which he had little understanding. An old African proverb says, when an elder dies, a library is burned. I'm not yet an elder, but I do feel a portal between two worlds. I am the last person in my immediate family who holds this particular library of knowledge. As the years pass, the sense of urgency I feel about sharing my experience with my children and the world grows. In my imagination, I have shared my story with each of you many times as we gather under a clear black sky, its shiny stars guiding my ancestral wisdom. I have imagined you leaning into me as if I had brought the news of water after a drought. I have poured us more tea, for I knew it was going to be a long night under the luminous moon. I want to get this tale of mine right. The fire between us has crackled with excitement, as if to notch my story along. But now it's no longer enough for me to just imagine telling you my story. I feel the need to bring you all to the fire and into my world. Thank you. Often when you have to read, it's a bit difficult and nerve-wracking, but I hope I have composed enough.
I think that was beautiful. It was such beautiful imagery in that opening, and it's such a great way to start, you know, to picture us all around a fire together. I love it so much. It's such a beautiful book. And, you know, I think that one thing that was really evident in that beginning that you wrote is that this book deals with so much difficult material. I mean, you talk about war and displacement and assault and hunger and abuse, but there's so much joy and humor and delight in every page. So can you talk a little bit about the role that joy plays in your life and delight plays in your life?
I think, Mathangi, it is, as you said, it deals with such a hard subject, right? Female circumcision, war, even attempted rape. So I really wanted to weave this story in a way that you, the reader, can. I don't want the people to really see or to be bogged down the victimhood, right? Because I feel like anthropologists excavating this forgotten world. I really want you to just come by the fire with me and just listen this story with me. So I didn't really, that was my idea. Also, I've really, when I was first telling this story to my children, I find myself, even that time, I would often kind of make the story in a way that my children can understand, or anybody can understand, without them saying, "Mom, this happened to you," you know, because these are my children. I didn't want to burden them unnecessarily. And by the end of the day, honestly, I actually do have a funny side in me. Despite all that happened, you may be surprised to learn that I don't look at myself as the victim of a situation. I actually feel quite lucky that I, the desert daughter of my mother, and the granddaughter of my poetic grandmother, is here today with all of you here, telling you my tale. That is, to me, unbelievable, like amazing. So I am really grateful that I'm glad that that little joy, or whatever, my little jokes when I'm talking about the orgy, which is the male goat in heat, come through it, because I really meant to really show you for what it is, and, you know, to show you the silly side of me, and humor is important.
You know, speaking, I mean, sort of referencing something you just said, you're never the victim in this book, but you also talk about female genital mutilation, and you talk about the realities of patriarchy, some of which are quite familiar to me from my own culture, of just, you know, men being valued over women, and I think many of us have experienced that. But I love the way you write about it, because you're never condescending, you know, and it's never like, it's always very nuanced. So can you talk a little bit about what it's like to write about patriarchy as somebody who's from Africa or from the global South? Because I often find books about the countries that I come from are not as balanced as, I mean, you never like stray away from the problems, but you also, they're not the whole story. You know?
I think it's important because, as you know, Africa, India, Asia, all of these countries, like in like Pakistan, India, all of these Asian countries you're speaking of, everybody's always like, it's easy to paint us as the victim, right? And for me, I see even Somalis are always talking about these amazing things, but the world doesn't know that we have the longest water shore and all of this amazing thing, that chaos and beauty exist, destruction exists in my people. So I really didn't want to we're talking about what were we talking about?
Writing about patriarchy.
Yeah. So I think I just really want to tell a story, and from a point of a young woman who was a teenager when these things were happening. I felt invisible at the time, and I had my family with me, all of them. And honestly, I didn't, you know, it's hard to say, if you're saying they did this to us, they did it, I just thought, let's just tell this story. And for one, it's so weave into this chaos and destruction is love, me falling in love, having crash, just stories that humanize us, right? Because we're bigger than our victimhood, right? We're bigger than all of these people are painting out. Somalia, like I said, is a lot of things are bad and good existed, but at the same time, you know, I am hesitant even if they are my people, just paint them one brush. We are bigger than that. Many of other cultures are bigger than that. But also at the same time, like you say, Mathangi, I didn't want to leave out the truth, right? So even though when I'm talking about the circumcision, I said, this is how the culture was. I was groomed for this. I felt my grandmother was actually doing me a favor that my mother passed away and she has to take on this. And she knew no one will marry me. At the same time, when it comes to down to describing, you see, I have come undone for you and tell you exactly how that day was. The birds that was flying over her, that come from my womanhood, the smell of the trees, had a feeling that we were heading for a slaughterhouse. I said, it's not an idealistic childhood. Viewers advice, right? Or readers advice. So I really wanted to show you, and a lot of people who wrote about Somalia and all that, you feel like often there's this victim and the reader cannot help but just to be bending knee for their pain. And that's not me.
You did that so beautifully, because there's so much in the book that's there's so much pain, but there's also so much strength, which I really enjoyed. Yeah. And speaking of your family and your grandmother is a very accomplished poet. Is that right?
She is, Mathangi, I even learned more things after I finished. And I'm like, I wish I would have known all of this thing. My grandmother was the most regal, amazing, I would say a feminist in her time, a poet. If she didn't like a husband, I heard that she didn't like her second husband, who she had to marry as a result. When she lost my grandfather, the rule was you marry the man's brother. As that's a way to keep the fortune or money or whatever they had into the family, for the family. So this is the woman. So she didn't like this guy that she has to marry in the Dumal process. And she was stingy, I heard. So she literally would, while he's sitting right there, she will insult him in a complicated, intricate, cerebral poem. And he could be like, eating and not know that this woman is giving. So to grow up under that shadow of that really uplifted me as a child. And like, this is why even when I was really Mathangi going through female circumcision and all of this, I felt like I was just a witty, brave child, because I was expected to be brave. I watched this woman who were in war with lion, who was a camel herder when most men were the camel herder, who was a camel tamer, where men were the camel tamer, who built her own portable house, who did everything. So in a way, I feel like she was the earliest, what do you say? Like not only a patriarch. There's a word I'm seeking that I'm not quite getting. Fighters.
Okay. What is I was going to say like a matriarch, maybe?
Yeah, not only matriarch, but someone who is the early movement. The word is, I know because I'm nervous, it's disappearing. I wanted to say to you, I feel like your name spells, am I saying it Mathangi right when I call you Mathangi?
It's Mathangi.
Mathangi, right?
Yes, yeah.
I do want to say that right. I got the feeling that I wanted to be respectful because, I wanted to get your name right, if anything,
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you. So to continue on about your grandmother, she was such an amazing figure in the book, and everything you're talking about completely comes through. And I'm just curious if, she has this poetic storytelling tradition. Did you draw on that, do you feel, when you were writing the book?
Yeah, I really felt, first of all, when I was writing this book, I have a confession to make. I had a moment where I had my incense burning and have my rosemary, and I had to talk to these ancestors of mine and ask their permission if they want this story of them to be told, So if my grandmother didn't want to be told, obviously it wasn't going to happen. These people have their own powers, I felt. So I really wanted to be respectful. It is my story of my mom, but it's the story of my poetic grandmother. So I want to really to be respectful. My grandmother, Mathangi, was an amazing woman. And of course, I drew a lot from, at times when I'm having a tough time, I think of how resilient she was. I mean, to survive in the desert, and mind you, desert did not kill her. My grandmother died on old age on her own, like no lions, no hyenas, no untamed camel. Camel. That is miraculous. I'm like looking at it as a nurse, and to see that she escaped unharmed, not even a broken body, I thought that was really amazing. One thing I actually meant to tell you earlier that I forgot was, and recently I learned the first time my grandmother say her first poems, she was only 12. And if you have few minutes, I can actually tell you the story surrounding that. So if you're okay with that, I will
Please,
go ahead.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that.
This story is really beautiful, and the one that really touched me very deeply and made me even have more respect for her and made me appreciate her resilience furthermore. This grandmother, think of the desert. As you see, I describe people who are living in huts, who have their animal enclosure, who herd their animal, who are constantly in grazing land and water, right? Survival of the fittest, the cycle that depends on it. So I heard during that time, and even maybe to a certain degree, maybe true today, is the nomads after a long day of herding and gathering by the fire, the youngsters will snuck out, and they will gather somewhere farther away from the hut under the moon, and they will do a poetry chant. This is, think of the rap where people are dissing each other, like this is really what it looks. So think of youngsters, both boys and girls, who may be interested in each other, but also they insult each other's clan. They talk about the land, the harshness of the desert, but they said, oh, you couldn't even fight that lion, you're going down. And so like, it's the beauty of that. So my grandmother was 12 at the time. And obviously she was not supposed to be part of that group. She's not quite 14 and 15, where these youngsters. However, she heard that the woman of her the girls of her sub-clan, the teenager of her sub-clan, lost the poetry slam, and she became indignant. So the second night, Mathangi, she snuck out and went with them, and that's when she there. Now think of this poetry: you insult somebody or you say somebody soon, and right away you have to rebuttal, and then you don't have time to write down, no writing, no reading, you just say it from your head right then. And this is why it's an oral tradition. And the poem that she uttered that time, or recite, wasn't really reciting because it's coming from she created right there orally, was one of those intricate, complicated poem. I'm like reading as an adult. I'm saying, my 12-year-old grandmother said this. Wow, if I could make a movie, that would be bringing this woman even more to life. And so in the poem, like for example, my mom and my dad as different sub-clans or different clans. So my grandmother actually shares my mother with the same clan. However, her mother, we think of a society who takes their male lineage, your clan is from your father's side, the patrilineal society, as you said. And so my mother was a different clan, and the girls were from that clan, but a sub-clan of that clan. So what she did is she started with the poem apologizing her mother, saying, "Mother, I'm about to come undone, but hey, I know you come from this bigger clan. I'm just picking on this smaller clan. So please, let me." Can you imagine Mathangi being 12 in the desert, just under the moon, just saying this? I was like, that's amazing. That's really amazing. I was just out of word for it. I don't know what to say than to say. I'm just amazed by 12, like. And that is the poem that actually she became famous for it. In that poem, Mathangi, she gave herself a poet name. My grandmother's name is Halima Hirsipila. She named herself Hadiya Oga Hardali, meaning the one with the decorated art or something like that. So basically she was talking incognito because she didn't want her parents to find out. Like every other teenager, she knew she would get in trouble. So I think that is really, I find that very beautiful and very touching to know that. And obviously I'm going to write down one day and put it in my website for people just to read it.
What a great story. I can see why you needed permission from her. I mean, I wouldn't mess with that ancestor.
No, I
That's
wouldn't.
Like the real deal.
You really have to bring your rosemary. You have to burn your incense. You have to respect, and it's very important for me. And speaking of culture, there's a lot to take from my grandmother. And there are things, like I see her for a woman of her time, a woman who loved me so fiercely, the woman who showed me life, who appreciated my wittiness, my curious mind, who I remember trying to catch a rite on an ostrich, and she's just watching me like, this granddaughter of mine is one wild one. The way she looked at me and smiled was so, I can tell her she was so proud of me. And in a culture that was shaming girls. So I'm very, very blessed to have her and again, I leave behind female circumcision, all of those things that don't serve me. And obviously I am someone who speaks of her mind, and a lot of Somali women are always standing up and fighting that patriarch culture. It's not only me, so many women. So there's hope in small ways.
Yeah, definitely. I think your grandmother would be very proud. I think she would love to read this book if she was still alive.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind everybody who's watching that we do have time for questions from you guys, and I don't see any in the chat right now. So we still have about 15 minutes. So if anyone wants to put any questions in the chat, please go ahead and do so. Until then, I'm going to keep asking my questions because I have lots of questions. So I'm just looking at my list here. Okay. So you talk in your book, you have a whole beautiful section and heartbreaking session about the war and escaping Somalia. And right now, especially with Lebanon and Haiti and Afghanistan, like refugees are very much on people's minds right now. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you would like readers to know about what it's like to actually be a refugee.
Honestly, there's a few chapters that was hard to write about. And though I was in physical stage, it's watching all your loved one get displaced and in bended knee, just the suffering of it, and not knowing this exodus, you were forced like a bird whose nest was burned too early, and you just fly away and you don't know where you're going, and then you head to your borders and they say you're not getting in there. I know I have a special, very soft spot for refugees, and I often remind people, it is selfish of all of us to see, right now I live in California, and to say, I don't care, that's their problem. But that's not how humanity works. I think we learned that through coronavirus, that we need to get vaccine to all over if we want this world to continue, right? Problem in Africa can come to you and vice versa, right? So I often tell people that was the most desperate time of my life, right? Like not knowing where my food was coming from. Safety was not there. That was the time women were collateral damage in a way that, the way with war was to, if you don't like that clan, you rape their women and saddle them with the enemy clan as children, right? And that's the worst for you. And so it was really a hard time for me. And I remember, people having dysentery, all kind of problem having, and then finding a safety home again. So I had, there's so many refugee displaced now. Recently, I haven't been sleeping well because of what's happening in Afghanistan. It's becoming a trigger for me, believe it or not, because all of a sudden they were saying people were running away and they were hanging onto the British airway and they were desperate. You know what? Why do you think someone will hang onto a plane that's flying away? What do you think he's running away? Obviously, and that's there's a problem. So I know, like I often tell people, please, donate whoever you can donate. And when a refugee comes here, don't look at them against us. Welcome them, hold them by the hand, show them. It felt to me like I have landed a new planet. Not only did I not speak the language, I come from the desert or a hot tropical country to a dead of the winter in Canada. It was really hard. And I remember I haven't finished high school in Somalia. And I was still young enough to go to high school, but I didn't go to high school, regular young high school. I went to adult high school because I didn't want to be picked on. I looked like this bewildered refugee who didn't even know how to take an escalator. Everything overwhelmed me. I thought that, elevators will take me to another crazy land. Didn't know how to even stop the bus. There were so many ways to stop the bus. Some of you have to step down and then it will open. Otherwise, you have to push. It felt like I was a surgeon by the end of the day. I was exhausted with all this stimuli. So I say, be kind and do whatever little you can do. And there is a thing that I live by personally. I live that energy has to, if something good happens in your life, you don't just take it. You think of, like, even if you buy a homeless person a food, even if you donate a refugee place, buy them a goat. There is Dabab in Kenya. Still, there are a lot of refugees. Even if you are a lawyer and you donate your time to help fill up papers, oh my God, the ways to help financially and every other way is endless. So I often tell people, don't think like, oh, I can't. There's so many things and always. Whenever something good for you, whenever your child survives through cancer, whenever your wife gives birth safely, please give, because you've been given a blessing. So share. I do that. I still do that.
Are you doing something now with the situation?
Oh yeah, I always give. I can't even tell how much money, because I give a lot. Literally within the past 3 months, 5,000 come out of my account. If I have to give you, because my father gave birth to 23 children. So what I do is I deal with family needs. And then I deal with one of the person yesterday I gave $100. He feeds children, orphanage children in Nairobi, and I saw it and I felt moved to help. So there's so much to help, during the Christmas time for Muslim people, Eid time. That's a time, a lot of cultures, you can buy a goat, I think, and donate, and somebody else with it. If you are vegetarian, give money or something to buy a vegetarian dish. I think there's always a way to help, and don't feel hopeless in that. There's a great hope in, and you feel good, and therefore some more great thing happen in your life. This is the whole meditation, gratitude. This is all what it means, really. I give more because, like I said, so my father fertilized the whole country and my siblings. But you know what I mean? The whole country, but you can give other ways. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this book is such a gift too, because it takes you, some of the scenes, when I was watching some of the footage about Afghani refugees, I was thinking of your book and the scenes of you guys, your family sneaking over the border in a truck, and then you going to Nairobi. And so there's so many similarities there.
It's so hard, so hard to watch, really. I'm hard. Sure. Because I imagine more. The picture is not just a picture for me. It's a lot more than that.
I imagine, because it's your experience, right? It's probably
very wrong.
Yeah. So, that actually leads me to another one of my questions is, in the section that you just read, you talked about how you want your children to know this history, and not just the history of fleeing Somalia, but also the history of being a nomad. And then there's time when you were in an orphanage. There's just so much in your history. So sorry, I have a cold. It's not COVID.
That's my way, my work.
I gotta take it.
My friend gave me COVID even though I'm vaccinated. So I know what you mean. Yeah, go ahead. So can you talk a little bit about why you feel this history is so important to pass on? When I really said, when an elder dies, a library is burned, I really meant it it's so much knowledge from the past. I felt like this anthropologist excavating this world, this is their history. I don't know about you, Mathangi, but I know that if your child reads a story, or if you share your story with them, the strength they can draw from that is stronger, right? I know my daughters, a lot of times if a boy broke my heart, all of this I share it with them. And so therefore, in a time where a boy, Californian boys or girls for my son break their heart, they know to say, my mom kind of had a really tough time, but she come through too. Or in a time where just life is, they're having their own emotional, COVID was tough on a lot of people, right? So it's really, this story that lived before us is important for us to draw from energy, but also historical wise for them to know, but also they understand me better, who I am, the sacrifice I made for them as a mother, some of the painful things that went through, which I would never want my kids to go through, such as female circumcision. I think if anything, at least they understand that instead of picking the alcohol up or maybe drugs, I said, you know what, this generation, I'm going to do something right. So you guys, can do something right? We know that that generational, what they call multi-generational trauma, and that if I am also causing problem on, if I'm creating problem, they will just freaks havoc on all these people to come. So honestly, I am a believer that all deep oral traditions should live on, and that that there is a place for gathering and telling each other stories, especially as we graduate from these tough times. Perhaps we can have time to gather and socialize and tell each other story without looking our phone or books or whatever. Just share.
Have they read the book? Have your kids read the book yet?
Yeah, so I know that my oldest read, and it took her a little bit longer because she is my introvert, emotional child who takes everything so deep, and she is herself a writer. So it was really hard for her. But then when she passed certain chapters, I see that she get better. My son haven't read, but I do remember him, and I think he will sometime soon. I remember him learning about that that I had a female circumcision just by me talking to a friend. He was like, "What are you talking about?" Like he had this look like he really kind of short-circuited. Like they did that to you. I'm like, yes, yeah, that happened to me and many other Somalis. That is the norm in my culture. So it kind of felt even strange telling him. But my youngest is 14. She just started high school, and very amazing young woman herself. I think eventually she will read it, I'm sure. But yeah.
It feels good to have them read it?
Oh, it feels really, I find myself really, I was very happy because they find it very, by the end of the day, they were very grateful. Even my nieces and nephew, all of them were like, wow, you capture all this history for us. I mean, who knows? My grandchildren could be white, they could be, I'm from Somalia, but they could be African American, they could be Indian. I don't know who my children are going to marry. But what I know is they will know these foremothers, that the strong women that they come from. And I think that is helpful in any way, right? It can only help, it can't hurt.
That's so inspiring. They sound like great kids too.
My kids, let me tell you, really honestly, I'm not kidding, because you think, okay, God, like maybe I've done something wrong and God, like, are you going to come after me? But they are such a kind kid. Everybody says they are the kind of kids who, when they go to the fridge, they say, can I make you something? They're the kind of kids who get up for old people. They're the kind of kids who notice that homeless person who's just, no one noticed. They bring water. They just really, honestly, I don't know. Perhaps I did something right, because all the people who hung around with them, they always talk about them. Kids gravitate toward them. A professor was telling me recently, because my ninth grader apparently was organizing all these study groups, and they said your daughter was so kind and so respectful and so inclusive that I guess we have a leader in here, and she's my youngest is exceptionally kind. She has so much love for people and humanity. If I worry about the world that will sometimes hurt her, because she's so kind and so giving. And she will just, whenever they see babies, I have to tell them, now we have to, don't touch these babies because, it's COVID, but before they will just go to babies and grab them and play with them. So yeah, I'm very, very proud of them. Really, no one is using drugs. No one is doing crazy things. It is a blessing,
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. And I can see that spirit of giving and generosity in your book. So I think you did do a lot of things right.
Thank you. My husband and I both, my children are half Ethiopian. As you know,
right. I know for the book.
Yeah, I married the enemy, right? So the Ethiopian and Somalis don't get along. But I said the best way to make peace is to marry the enemy. So I think I picked a very good man. My husband is a software engineer, and I tell people I've been married since 1900. I just married the first guy who thought I looked nice. I said, thank you. I'll go with you.
Well, that's actually not true. But if you want to find out more about Shugri's love life, you have to read the book. So maybe that's a good note.
Other series, hopefully.
Right, exactly. So Ali, it's been 45 minutes. Are we at time, or do we have any questions from the audience or anyone?
So I'm not seeing any questions. So if anybody has questions, now is the time. We would love to hear from you all. Yeah. In the meantime, real quick, I have a couple of questions that I would love to ask. Mm-hmm. So a question that I always love to ask authors, and especially memoir writers. What was your best day while writing this book, and what was your hardest day?
Oh my goodness. Well, a best day is a day where everything flows amazingly, and that I'm not grammatically editing my words as they go and judging my thoughts. That is a really good day. Sometimes I find myself really when I'm hiking. Isn't that such a nomadic thing? And when I am among, just hiking, and I'm hearing the birds, the vultures, do their thing, the lizards just whisper around, just watch the sun, everything, right? Really, that is the time I'm more creative, which kind of I go, oh my God, I am hiking. I can't write all this amazing thought, right? Then I go home and I go, yeah. And a bad day is the day that I thought I wrote an amazing thing, and I looked at it and go, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. Was I drunk? Even though I don't drink, what's going on here? And then I have to sit down and edit and lose all these great, amazing ideas and amazing words, So sometimes I found that when I'm really talking to you, if I have that good chemistry, like the one I'm having with you, Mathangi, that actually some words can flow better out of me, and that I actually speak better or say things better when I'm in that natural, not editing myself,
But that's so interesting, Shugri. So it has to do with the writing and not with the material, because there's some really difficult material in this book.
Yeah, you would be thinking, there are, people often assume the chapter on the circumcision was the hardest one. And I hate to tell people that was not the hardest, because you have to understand, think of a child who got cancer and had a loving parent and dealt with it, and maybe the whole society, half of the society gets cancer, right? You think that is just how life is. The hardest chapter to write was the chapter about the orphanage, when I was lost and I was taken away from my nomadic grandmother. She actually released me after I lost my mother without giving, and living with this foreigners, seeing the first white people think this were my new parent, and the confusion and alienation and all of the disparity and lost. I felt lost and vulnerable. And that is because I know how much I love my children. When they are sick, I take them in. When they want to sleep in the bed with me, I let them stay, honestly. And I think I know if they want something, I want for them. All my hopes and dreams and love, and yeah, I feed them. Their hunger bothers me. And imagine that I did not have someone to do that for me. I think that was I have to deal with it. And so I find myself one day really crying, sitting in my California bed, sobbing, surrounded by paper, and typing away as I type, like just coming undone, just like, and I guess it was cathartic. I really needed to do that. Yeah. But yeah, and I think that is the whole point, Mathangi, is to be really honest. I didn't want to paint more victimhood. I didn't want to paint more excitement than it is. I just want to tell a story and just take you along. As you see, even as you read the female circumcision, not only that, I tell you what happens when I was curious about sex. I tell you what happens to later on when I met the young girl who was getting married. I tell you later on when I too have to undo this procedure. So I took you along all the way to the end.
Very honest.
Yeah, really.
Very, very honest. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to try and get through them. So there's one question about what language you guys speak at home. And do you speak both your language and your husband's language at home?
Husband and wife always have a little competition when they speak two different languages. My husband speaks Amharic. He's from Ethiopia. I speak Somali. So this is the scenario that would happen in our house when we're and I think there's a little competition whether we both like to admit. So I will tell the kids in Somali how to say milk, and they say, Papa, Appa, give me milk. And say, Father, give me milk in Somali. And he said, I don't understand that.
Make him say it in Amharic.
He will perhaps do the same thing, and I would say maybe I don't understand. So I realized in the end I have to really often sit with it. I couldn't help but to think that perhaps we both want to just be good in our own language. But let me tell you the beauty of what came out in my house. I remember one time having 20 members of my husband's family and some of my family here. There were Amharic, Somali, Tigrinya, which is a language from Ethiopia. There were Swedish. I think somebody was maybe speaking Italian. And now in my household, I speak Somali, English. My husband speaks Amharic and obviously English. My daughter, my oldest one, speaks Swedish, English, Spanish. And my youngest is learning Japanese. So just like my father, they are language. My children inherit that gene, and they also work hard. They're always learning. So in a way, what I told my children, it's okay if you don't want to. In the end, my husband's like, no, they need to learn our language. I said, actually, let's just give them a choice. So in the end, what happened is my oldest daughter picked Swedish and became very good at it. She even traveled there. And she speaks Spanish. And my youngest is now learning at school Spanish, and she's self-teaching. And I mean, deeply, like these kids are like teaching me so many, writing down, practicing. I'm trying to find someone who lives in Japan. If you know, feel free to. I want to connect her with another kids. Really, she's teaching herself Japanese, and she's embodying the whole culture. So every culture, all of this amazing. We are cultures and subcultures, and we are the melting pot of America, honestly. That is the beauty of that one. Yeah. How about yours, Mathangi? How about your household?
So my daughter actually, she spent the first 3 years of her life in India, and she was very good in Hindi and Tamil and English. And then within 6 months of coming here, she lost it all except for English.
That is
so, but you know what? Yeah, this is a very comforting thing to hear also, because I also feel like she's really interested in Spanish right now. She's only 6, she's only 5. So maybe she'll learn Spanish. Maybe, you know, I learned Tamil much later in life, even though it's my mother tongue. So
we are open. This language thing, people make it
Yeah.
way harder than I think, and let children learn. Like my husband was like, it's better they could go communicate with their government. But I said, hey, let's not just force. And obviously we felt something. So now we both have to get over our egos and let these kids learn what they want. Like, no more competition. This is not a proxy war between Somalia and
Ethiopia. I do want to know that, like, for me speaking, so I speak 3 languages well. And for me, knowing those languages has really helped my writing in English, I feel. I'm wondering, did you have the same experience?
It's funny because you were saying, I didn't think it was helping me, but I know that I was listening. I was reading a Somali guy recently he wrote a book called Nuruddin Farah. I was just reading his book called The Crooked Rib, which I quickly knew what that was. Just I felt there's a Somaliness. And when he was speaking, when he was writing, I don't know if it was translated from Somali to English. It's beautiful writing. But what I noticed is, oh my God, he's translating, his Somali is so rich that his English is rich. But I find myself when I say, for example, when I was saying the old nomad bellow to the desert to voice his agony. That is, bellowing comes from the word a camel, like who bellows, right? A camel will bellow when it's in great distress. So the way my analogy is of my upbringing, the way I perhaps put together words are maybe of my because of this oral tradition, this deep, because Somalia is a nation of poets, and we have amazing, our poems are, like I say, very cerebral, like hard and intricate, and you really have to be deeply intelligent to even say it and put it together. Like, that's why I'm very impressed with my grandmother. And then when I'm writing, I find myself, because of that background, it actually does help me. You and other people are making me think, because as I analyze my own self, I said, perhaps what other people are saying is true. Because the way I write, for someone who didn't take literature, people are, wow, that, like, you remind us, somebody compared to me one time, Charles Dickens. I'm like, no, girl, like, she, you know what I mean? This right, I'm like, oh boy, I'm gonna get it. Big head now, but honestly, I'm like, to be compared, perhaps also because he's an old writer, maybe there's a way. Also, Mathangi, I forgot to tell you that I actually, so what do I get from the bookstore? I get love letters from long time, 17th centuries. So I'm weird, I got like poems. So I feel like all of that is helpful. Sometimes when I don't feel like writing, just reading these old poems and love letters or stories from the long time ago, somehow it inspires me to come up with better words too. So
your tone is both very conversational and poetic. So that's totally making sense with your background from your poetic ancestors and conversational oral tradition. So I definitely see it.
Well, thank you. I often feel like, I said I couldn't tame those verbs and subjects to agree with each other. They have issue with each other. But perhaps I can just sometimes, honestly, Mathangi, just writing and leaning or not worried about how things are going to go, just writing from the heart and just feeling the words and feeling the story is enough to just help me write beautifully. And then I can worry about the edits of what I need to tame it to make it behave.
It's such great advice for writers too.
Because
I think often as writers of color, especially who are writing towards a Western audience, I often doubt my writing from the heart. But in the end, it's the best. It's the best writing.
It's funny you say that, because I said, listen. I mean, people would often like, do you have a literature, degree in literature? I'm like, well, I have a degree in Somali literature, maybe. Like, I mean, we learn our Somali literature deeply, but I often tell people, listen, I'm an infusion nurse. People call me when they couldn't start that damn IV. Like, I'm one of those people they call for her IV. So obviously chemistry, I would do, like, I did very well. Like, honestly, I'm not lying when I said I would get 95% or more. And people were very impressed. However, you handed me an English paper and you can bring me to tears. And look what I'm doing. Like, oh my God. So I do carry we have to be human. But all of us have, there are times I'm like, I can't even finish this paragraph today. How am I writing a book, you know? But I think when I let that go and I just say, let me write a story, another side comes out. And I think people forget to tell people that you don't have to have a great degree in literature. You don't have to be so smart that the whole world is, you get it up your finger, whatever. Like really, you just have to be human and write, and do not let other people kill you and your voice. And I am just happy to, I think when it comes to writing, I'm going to give it to you. I'm like, okay, maybe you are all better than me, but I'm just going to do me here, right here.
Well, you've done it so well. It's such a gorgeous book.
Thank you.
Ali, do you want to ask your last question before we go?
Yes, that sounds wonderful. So I think my last question is always the same, and it is, what is on the horizon for each of you? What should we look out for from both of you in the future?
Shugri, do you want to start?
You go ahead, man.
Neither one of us wants to go. Do you see this? We're both.
I know. I'm making you talk about yourself.
No, it's all good. So I'm in a weird place right now because I actually I don't have an agent anymore. So I'm not sure how I'm going to sell anything. So I have to find an agent.
We need to help you with that. Yeah.
But I'm working on a YA novel right now that is actually an interesting story. So I'll just tell it really quickly because this event is about Shugri. But so COVID was really bad in India, and a bunch of my friends were having a hard time. Yeah. And so I started writing like chapters of this book for them and just sending it to them, which is great because I had really bad writer's block, but I owed them a chapter, and I've been doing it since May, and I almost have a book now, a YA book, which is a completely bonkers book, and I don't know
what are you gonna call it, Mathangi?
I don't know. It's so crazy. It's like it starts with this girl going to temple on her period, and then a goddess appears and gives her special powers and tells her that, so it's insane.
I already love it. Please, honestly, I can feel good stories.
Thank you. And I'm also working on a memoir about pregnancy loss, and my daughter is adopted. So Shugri, I may be coming and banging at your door being like, help me.
Oh my goodness. No, I was like, it's very normal. But I think because you wrote a book before, Mathangi, you are going to be quite all right.
Well, I would say the same thing to you. So what's on the horizon for you?
Oh my God. Sometimes I feel like a manic lady. I have so many things happening. What really, my agent is amazing. My Jillian McKinsey, I love her. And I think life meant to, we meant to be together. Like she's like a sister from another mom, right? And she wants me to write a picture book, which I'm going to come back to. Don't you have a picture book?
I have a few out actually. Yeah. So we should talk.
When I say I'm going to call you and maybe ask you a lot of stupid questions, and you're going to say, this woman is crazy.
No, I'm not going to say that. I'm sure they're going to be great questions. This is going to happen. We're going to make this happen.
Please. I've never done this new thing. So that's one thing she's going, I have an idea how I want to start. I see the sun coming behind the acacia tree. I see the bleeding of our animal and all, goats and sheep and camels. I want to make her a little bit warrior. I want to make her like a kind of curious and witty girl, like brave as well.
Like you.
Yeah, a little bit of that childhood. And because I know so much about the nomad, it's just more like that's probably what I would ask you. I don't know where to go. It's just someone to bounce idea about. And then when she initially told me to write this, guess what? I went and wrote a middle grade book that's almost done. Wow. And so that's what happened. And I can share that with you. Obviously, she gave me some idea when I showed her, and but this middle grade book is gonna wait a little bit there, because the last nomad, we just finished, we have to give the young readers version. We have to get that book. So that is the priority, to get this young readers, because we have this amazing people who wants to read. And I don't want to, being a mother, I don't think some children are ready to read about female circumcision, other things. And there are stories that, such as when I try to try to ride an ostrich, or the details of dung beetles that I was trying to find out what it's doing to my shit and all that. And kind of that we wind out that we can put it back now. There are, chapters that can stay, chapters can go. And then I interview Somali women. So this is a project, perhaps maybe I'm more excited in this than anybody else. So this is the one that's very interesting. Mathangi and Ali. So, we went through female circumcision. All Somali women went through, majority of us, right? It is still practice in high percentage, sadly. And I hope to do something if I gain this money to educate young girls and communities, perhaps to help with that. And so I find myself like, I am a woman who went through that, but people often give me a look that I am sexually done as a woman, right? There's this victim look they give me, more like I feel sorry, pityness, don't pity me. And so I thought I should talk to all these women while making a novel. This story is going to be more like a novel. 5 women who I have already interviewed, and I start writing because I'm always up to something. And one woman is married to, for example, white guy. Another woman is married to African American. All these women are talking about their stories. One woman actually told me, "Hey, Shugri," she said, "I have a better feeling than some of my white friends." That is a statement to make as a Somali woman. I said, "So you're circumcised like other Somali women?" "Yes." "And you have we need to sit and have a tea. You're intriguing me as a Somali."
Yes.
Start with her and get all this story from her. And it's really beautiful. I just want to show them that these women are living. Some of them have good feelings, some of them don't have, but it's just, let's just not look at them with pity. We're bigger than this. And I want to share all of this, like this woman, what she shared with me. And I'm like, well, how are you even have this amazing feeling that you have? And what she told me was mind-boggling. I was like, what? That's how you did? Like, there was masturbations involved. There were all kind of things. And I'm so happy because remember, we come from a culture that is shame and all of this. And I feel victorious to see, to write about this is women who are, some didn't do well, some did amazing with their life. And some of them are doctors, nurses, and yeah, I am very excited about that one. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. It's sort of like what you're saying before too, right? There's as many stories as there are people. There's not one Somali culture, one Somali experience, right?
And look at me, like we are not the woman who married out of clan, right? Obviously, like my children don't even, my son was like, what's your clan? Because maybe perhaps somebody told him some story about this clan connection. I'm like, oh boy, stay away from that one. But what I'm trying to say is like, I married an Ethiopian man. I stepped out of like forbidden love, right? Some of my niece married I said American guy, but American white, white American. And I think there are some, like I said, who marry African. But look at us. All of these women are breaking that cultural shackle, right? And marrying out of what is expected of us and leaving the clan and world behind. And so it's an uncharted territory, but I have an idea how I'm gonna to tell this story, and I'm really excited about it. And I think many people are just as curious as me, like one of my friends said, Shugri, these days people are even getting gender assignment, perhaps we can, I'm like, okay, it's not that bad, girlfriend, just let's not go to that craziness, but it's that kind of stories that really, I really, like you say, Mathangi, this one brush doesn't fit all of us. We are a diverse group of people. We are the diaspora women. There are women growing up back home. And all of us living in different culture. Like one guy said, people, Somalis of Swedish are a bit different. Somalis of Denmark are a bit different. Somalis of Canada are a bit different. Somalis of America were a bit different. Look how much this melting pot of culture of diversity we have become ourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm back. Thank you. It's about time that we call it an evening, but I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much for being here, for sharing these stories with us. I cannot wait to see what comes next.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I wanted to hear, and Mathangi, can you repeat the title of your book one more time?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's A People's History of Heaven. That's my latest book.
Okay, thank you. There is
Thank
a drought, so please get her book and get through.
Get both our books.
Yes, go buy books.
Yeah.
Follow the links. They're in chat. They will
Exactly.
be there for finding audience members. Of course, as always, thank you for showing up. We so appreciated having you here. Follow those links in chat to go find some books. And I think with that, it's time to call it a night. So
You did so well.
thank you. No, you. So shall we let the awkward waving begin?
Let's do
I
it.
was going to say, Mathangi, leave me your contact and all that. Send me through email, and I will try.
I will. We'll
Guys,
catch up.
bye.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.